get some stragglers as it kind of comes on, and we'll kind of keep that going as we roll through this. I'm also going to turn my camera off. If everybody can turn theirs off, it'll make the speed go faster. Excuse me. And then I'm going to share my screen. And from there, we will kind of jump into it. Actually, I'm going to stop sharing because I have to be on the slide deck before I do that. And then I'm going to share my screen. So. Okay. So essentially, thanks for coming today. I really appreciate everybody being here. I wanted to kind of put together a quick-ish webinar for trucking dealerships. We've done this a couple of times, but I think because of our guest star, Melinda Mcauliff, I'll introduce in 2 seconds, I promise. I think this one is really going to make a difference. She is under no illusions about the magic that it takes to implement, drive adoption, and continually kind of refine excuse me, a CRM system, and she can share some of that really useful information with everybody on the phone as we kind of roll through this. For those of you who don't know me, I think most do, we are BlackIron. So BlackIron's a Salesforce partner, over 2,000 projects. We've been doing this for 21 years at this point, so a ton of time in the saddle. We are a CarMac partner. We're a Salesforce partner, but we're also a CarMac partner. We've integrated to Proceed. We've integrated to DSI. That's who Melinda uses, and CDK in the past. So basically, the biggest and baddest kind of DMS systems out there in the trucking dealership space, have all been successfully integrated to Salesforce, and we've done the work to kind of put that together. We've also kind of over time and almost by accident learned the trucking business very well. We've done over 24 trucking dealership implementations, and so we have a lot of experience in and around that area. We learn something every time, we always do, but the ideas about how trucking dealerships kind of run and how you can use CRM combined with DMS is a topic that we understand pretty well. We think that if CRM is used along with your DMS data, it can increase sales for what you guys do. I'm going to show in a demo how you can do Deal Desk or the quote process in Salesforce. That makes it a lot easier for the reps out there in the field. You can do it from anywhere, right? Because it's a cloud-based application. A lot of the kind of stuff that goes on those deals, add-ons and trade-ins and FET and all that kind of stuff can be built into Salesforce so that we can calculate and do that work. And then putting that data together inside of the system gives your users the ability to sort of analyze that data, use it in kind of ongoing negotiations and conversations with customers, and gives executives sort of a bigger feel for what that pipeline looks like, which doesn't really, it's not a DMS kind of jam. You know what I mean? It doesn't really exist in the DMS system alone. You can build pivot tables or crystal reports and that kind of stuff in it, but it's not really built around customer first, and CRM is. So if you can use the CRM data inside of Salesforce for trucking dealerships, we can increase the sales. And then the same, wow, this is a big slide. When we start to add that DMS data to it, it makes an entirely different kind of level there for you to put it together. Taking DMS data, right, knowing sales for repairs and parts and vehicles and that kind of stuff really gives us the point to basically do some really kind of competitive and serious analysis. One of the things that Melinda said to me that stuck with me is she's using data so that her sales reps get to know their customers. And I don't think she means, dropping off cupcakes. I think she means understanding what they're buying and probably just as important, what they're not buying. You can use that information to forecast sales. You can use that information to do white space analysis, figure out what they're not buying, and take all of that and kind of roll it into better decision making and better kind of trips, better quoting, kind of better everything as you deal with those customers. Okay, so now the part that's really going to matter. I'd like to introduce Melinda Mcauliff, who's kindly volunteered to do this. She's the Director of Sales Operations at Kenworth North East. Melinda and I go back probably 7 or 8 years, Melinda, something like that. So we've been working with each other, kind of started as colleagues and have become friends over the years. Melinda used to work at another client that we worked with, Regional International, and then is now Director of Sales at at Kenworth, and she has a very kind of interesting set of insights into how trucking dealerships can use data, both CRM and DMS data, to kind of improve reps and their days and their increase in sales in the system. So I'm going to turn it over to Melinda to kind of talk, and I'll be her color announcer if she needs me. So Melinda, meet everybody. Everybody meet Melinda.
All right, awesome. Thank you. So one of the places I like to start when talking about Salesforce or any CRM is understanding the scale of the journey you're on. A lot of times we think about, the things that we purchase in life for work or whatever, and it's like you buy it and you move on. With CRM, it is truly a journey. And for us at Kenworth North East, it started back in 2022. That was around the time that I actually started here at this dealership because I had a background with Salesforce, and the dealership knew that the system they were using at the time was not adequate enough. I took on the challenge of doing a requirements gathering and system evaluation and selection project where we went through and pretty thoroughly evaluated about 5 different systems. So I came into it knowing that I had a preference for Salesforce, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just walking in with my own preconceived notions. I wanted to make sure I understood this dealership, what its needs were, what its processes are, what its existing systems are, and that Salesforce was going to be the right tool to plug into everything else. So that we went through that process for about 8 months or so, and then eventually we got to a point, and that requirements gathering piece that included people, process, and technology, all 3 streams. We got to the point where we're looking at everything, and my executive team all said, we agree we need this tool, but we don't have the right people in place. And at that point in time, what we were missing in our New York stores to support that sales team was a regional sales manager who could help to really make sure that user adoption took place. So 3 months later, we had hired on that regional sales manager. And I came back around to the executive team and say, hey, we filled this gap. Are we ready to move to the next step? And so that's when we decided to move to the next step. So I like to tell that part of the story because when you're thinking about your CRM and what your journey or your implementation is going to entail, you really want to take all of those bits and pieces into account: people, process, and technology. Who's going to run the system? Who's going to, hold people accountable for using it? How are your end users going to use it? What other systems are impacted? What processes are impacted? All of those things are going to inform everything that happens after it. And the more thorough you are on the front end on that requirements gathering piece, the much more successful you're going to be as you move through your Salesforce implementation and then the ongoing management and use of it. So going into 2023, that's when we did our Salesforce kind of scoping and development. I brought on BlackIron and worked with them to build out our system. I think it took us from when we were able to get started, probably there was a couple of months, and a part of it for us is we were in the summertime and we had some folks that were on vacation. And so some of it got a little bit slowed down. So it took a little bit longer than I'd hoped, but so it was a couple of months for us just because of that piece. And then we got into about Q4 and I did our rollout. We started with our part sales organization. And it was accounts management, call logging, and using Salesforce maps for routing. Those were the 3 things that I started everybody in. And then since then, we've been growing, and we'll talk about that as we go. But I have found both an experience and whatnot with salespeople. If you try and throw everything at them at once and basically change their whole life overnight, you're going to get a blank screen. So kind of rolling it out in pieces, learning as you go, in alignment with what it is that your organization needs is definitely going to help set you up for success as well. So then throughout 2024, so remember this is the end of 2023 that we brought our part sales team into the system. So 2024, there's ongoing sales user adoption activities, training, process enhancements. We're learning as we're going. But that training piece, that's another one of those pieces, definitely not a one and done kind of activity, especially when you're bringing people into a system like this and there's a lot that's changing. I'll guarantee you probably have a lot of salespeople who are married to their notebooks, and they do not want to stop using their notebooks to keep all of their notes for every account. But then if you call them and say, hey, what's going on with ABC Trucking? You can hear them flipping through pages and pages and pages and then respond with, oh, hold on, I think that's in my other notebook. Um, so so getting them to kind of make that change of doing it with the pen and paper and moving into, because they're already, like call logging essentially, it's just moving into the system to do it there instead. That user adoption piece, it's not going to happen overnight for some people. For some people, it will. It depends on where your folks are at. And then the training piece, I found that one, breaking up the training into clusters of information where it's like, okay, today we're going to talk about account management. On another day, we're going to talk about, like call logging or using list views or, list emails, whatever the functionality was. And then the Salesforce maps, that in particular, I definitely had to break out as its own separate thing. When I broke it out into chunks and then said, okay, we've talked about this, and now coming out of this training, here's 3 things I want you to start doing today. And then a couple weeks later, we would hit the next topic. Okay, here's 3 things to start doing today. The other piece of that is being accessible and available. So I let my salespeople know all the time, like, I am never too busy for you. Like, if I can't respond when you call, text me. I promise I'll get back to you before the day is out. And it's very seldom that I don't actually get back to somebody within the same day. Because for me, my salesperson, like, they are the cornerstone of what is, what makes us successful with our customers. So I want to make sure they have the tools that they need. So making sure to have somebody who can be on point and be responsive to your sales team is definitely a key piece of it as well. So then another piece in 2024 that we started looking at, so we have an internal call center that it's kind of like a virtual parts counter, basically, that when, a lot of times, probably the most traditional way of doing it is your outside salesperson needs to get a quote for brake chambers. So they call into their local parts counter, have somebody there work on it. To relieve some of that from our store parts counters, we created a quote unquote virtual call center that's based out of our distribution center. And that team there is dedicated to providing our outside salespeople with quotes. And we started looking at what we could do to enhance the communication between the call center and the sales team. And so I built into Salesforce case management, where all of the requests that come in from the sales team are now flowed into Salesforce. They manage the cases there, and all the communication, it's all within the system, the back and forth. And then that call center team has a dashboard that tells them how many open cases there are, how many minutes, hours, and days has it been open, what the workflow is for any individual person. So are we over, do we have one person who's doing more than another, those kinds of things. So we can do some workload balancing too. That was a piece of it that when we first bought Salesforce, I never would have thought of as, we can use it for this, but that was something that emerged as definitely beneficial and something we're continuing to build out on this year as well. And then the other piece was coming into the end of last year, I started bringing my truck sales team into Salesforce. So for our truck sales team, there was not as much of a infrastructure in place in terms of things like account assignments and territory management and that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of that kind of back end work that had to happen first. And so for my truck sales team, what I've done is my first area with them, that's been my key area of focus, has been management of inbound leads. So I'm also responsible for marketing, and we've got a lot of in-stock trucks right now. We're in New York State and Massachusetts, 2 states that have the ACT laws. So we brought in a lot of inventory so that we could, be prepared for not being able to order once 2025 hit. And so with that, I did a lot of work to bring in inbound leads, and I wanted to make sure that, if I just send these stuff off by email, it just went off into the ether. But now that I've got everything recorded in Salesforce for these truck sales leads, I can see, who it's been assigned to, have they looked at the lead, have they responded to the lead. I can also evaluate my, basically the lead sources. And the big one for me is truck paper worth the dollars we're spending on it. versus everything else that I'm doing for Google Ads and, our inbound calls, our cold calling. I can now compare all of that because all of our inbound leads are recorded in Salesforce now. As we go through 2025, we're continuing to enhance the way that we're using truck sales. We have some work in our DMS where hopefully, if not by the end of this year, hopefully early into next year, we're looking to bring our truck sales inventory all into Salesforce. So that way, from their mobile app, our truck salespeople can quickly and easily see, look up a unit. Is it on hold? Is it in stock? Is it on order? What are all the specs on it? Is there a body on it? What's the body invoice? Once I'm able to flow that information in from my DMS into Salesforce, it's going to really, kind of put some superpowers into the hands of my truck salespeople to make that information much more readily available while they're out on the road than it has in the past. So that I'm excited for is one of the things we're looking ahead to in 25 and 26. So now, the other thing for this year, we've had the system in place for our parts sales team for a while now. And in I'd say fourth quarter, kind of coming into the fourth quarter of last year and into this year, I've put some things in place where our focus in my conversations with my outside sales team is very much around two things. What are we doing to increase our revenue on our existing accounts? And what are we doing for market growth? And both of those things we can get a really good key in on with the data that's available to us in Salesforce. And I've tried to set up the dashboards and I'm continuing to enhance them the more I'm working with the sales team to say, okay, and I had some account reviews yesterday where I said to the individuals I was meeting with, basically nothing should fall off the table without you knowing it or expecting it to come, because they have all the data available to tell them when a customer has stopped buying from them. And we all know that, if somebody starts buying their brake drums from another dealership, they're getting used to that new relationship, and it's going to be a lot harder for us to come back in and retake that business. So for me, I want to get ahead of that, and I want to make sure we're paying attention to the trends in our sales on these accounts so that we can get ahead of losing them before we've lost them. So that would be the account retention. And then the account growth piece, we've got some target sales numbers on our accounts. And what I did is I had the salespeople set their account target priorities themselves. And the way I put it to them, and a part of it is, empowering them, having them take charge of their accounts and whatnot, is I said to them, I'm like, nobody knows your customers better than you do. So which of, let's say the 125 customers that are assigned to you, which ones do you think you can get 20% growth in 2025? And which ones do you think you can get 10% growth in 2025? And we went through that activity in the fourth quarter. And now this year, when I meet with each of them individually once a month, we have a conversation about, okay, on your target account list, here's the ones who have not bought from you in 60 or more days. When some of them haven't bought from you in a few months, what's your plan? And sometimes they'll say, oh, well, this one's seasonal, or this one just had a staffing change, or, they have a pretty good sense of what's going on. But having those conversations is a really good way to make sure the stuff stays top of mind. Our outside salespeople have a lot that they're managing on any given day, whether it's, talking to a customer, making sure the quote's going through, fielding calls about, my delivery didn't get here when I wanted it, any number of things that are happening. So taking that moment to stop and just look at what's available. And, that's one of the things I'll say to them is, hey, when we have our one-on-one conversations, this is just 30 minutes for us to stop, take a breath, and check out what's happening with your accounts so that we know nothing's falling off the table. And then, like I said before, that inbound leads management, that's for truck sales, is right now my big area of focus. But then we've got some data stuff going into this year that we'll keep building out as well. We're also looking at this year, how do we use Salesforce to help us with growth on the service sales side? So that's some stuff we're in the early stages of too. And then ultimately, my vision for this is that I want to bring this whole thing together so that we're looking at our parts, our truck sales, and our service sales kind of as a comprehensive, unit and a sales cycle that's rooted in the customer experience. And I think, for anyone who's had conversations about, marketing, customer relationships, and all of those things, that people expect to be, treated and worked with as a cohesive whole. Whereas we operate within our segments, our customers are not seeing us as those segments. Like for me, my customers are seeing, whether it's parts, service, or truck sales, it's just Kenworth Northeast. So we need to come to them with that, whole house, Kenworth Northeast. We're all on the same page, and that's, like I said, one of my goals is that we're leveraging the tools at our disposal in Salesforce to help us get there too. So that's our journey so far. Any questions or thoughts so far? All right.
Silence is acceptance, right? So, yeah.
There you go. All right. So what CRM does and doesn't do? The big thing that, whenever I chat with people about CRM or get on my soapbox about it, is that, Salesforce CRM by itself is not going to generate sales. It's if you buy that system, it's not going to do it alone. There's a lot of work that needs to happen on the back end to help generate sales. It is a tool that can enable growth when the work has been done on the back end. And like I say here, it's got to be coupled with your sales process, sales team management, and your data insights. So a lot of it is bringing all the right people to the table and getting on the same page, about what's changing and what your goals are, setting the right KPIs, and then also meeting your sales team where they're at. I've got some people who are just like, they're still resistant to things like call logging. So one of the things I've done in the last few months is I've stopped calling it call logging altogether. I just call it customer engagement. And I've started talking to my sales team about the value of understanding our customer engagement and how that relates to our sales. And, that we're in a competitive market where, we can expect margins to tighten, prices to go up, and it's gonna, things can have the potential to get tough, in the next, few months to, through the year. And we want to get ahead of that. So, just understanding that customer engagement piece is one small piece of it. So I'm always looking for ways to kind of meet my folks where they're at, get them, set it up in a way that is as less painful as possible for them. I mean, sometimes, they'll make it sound harder than it is. I get that. But whatever I can do to, like I said, meet them where they're at and give them the right tools along the way too. So, and then also get what we need as a management team. Yeah, next slide. So the next couple of slides go through some of the challenges and solutions, just some of the things that I ran into and are probably pretty common. The first big one with Salesforce or any CRM is going to be user adoption. It's okay, if we buy this tool, we spend, $100,000 on our first year of licenses, how are we going to get people to use it? So, I'd say at the front end, identify the KPIs that are going to be important for you and your sales team to, it's the whole measure what matters kind of thing, and if you start with, the thing I was looking at early on wasn't just call logging, it was also user logins, because I knew not everybody was going to log a call, but if people were logging in, that meant that they were looking at their account information, and that was a bridge to cross, was just getting them logging in and interested in the information that was there. And so that was one of my starting points. And so I didn't just make it that one thing. And then over time, we've just continued to, talk with the team about what it is we need them to do in it. And I've got some pretty good scorecards now where when I meet with them one-on-one, we'll talk about, where they're at with their metrics. And those metrics are both sales and engagement metrics. So always incorporating that sales piece. If you don't incorporate the sales piece, they're just going to not listen. Excuse me. Really quick, I just want to see if there's anything else on that first one. Okay, yeah, go ahead to the next one. Accounts management. So for us, the account assignments was a big deal. The system that we had previously, it didn't do what we needed it to do. So not only, obviously, if you've got a salesperson who's been working the same territory for 10 years, they'll tell you, I don't need Salesforce. I already know who all of my customers are. But I'll tell you what, I've actually got one of those people who reached out to me about a month ago and said, you know what, can you get me into Salesforce Maps and show me how to use it? Because I think I'm missing some people on my route. And I think that if I can see them, it'll be helpful for me to know who I've missed. So even though like he legitimately has been working his territory for 10 years, he acknowledged, oh, wait a minute, I think I'm missing some folks and I want to make sure I'm, not missing anybody. So, and one of the ways I talk about Salesforce with the team too is, I'm going to give you a set of tools for your toolbox and you guys are all adults. And I'm, at some point I have to trust that you're going to decide which tools work for you. So that was one of those moments where I'm like, oh, this is working. Because he decided Maps was the tool that was going to work for him. So some of the other things I'd mentioned the idea of, Salesforce or the sales reps being married to their notebooks. If you haven't worked in Salesforce and on the account records before, when you're in the mobile app, one of the things that is nice is you can very easily swipe up from the bottom of the screen and see every note that's ever been logged. So I encourage my team that before you go talk to a customer, unless you just saw them yesterday and you know exactly what you already talked about, but if it's been a month since you've talked to them, check your notes, see what it was you talked about last, because when you go in and you can reference something that they talked with you about a month ago, they feel like, holy moly, this person's really paying attention to me. And then the other piece of it is the account records, the whole idea of enhancing your Salesforce with your DMS data. So in our account records, I've got this year's total sales, last year's total sales, and then I break it down by what were the parts sales, the truck sales, and the service sale. So now, whether it's a truck sales rep or a parts sales rep, when they look at those records, they know holistically what the relationship that account has with us. Are they doing service? Are they buying trucks from us? And that's not something that they had information, that readily access to before. So that's been a little bit of a game changer. And I've had some folks tell me like, that's the one thing before they go see somebody, they'll just pull that information up so they can see where the account is at, where they're at this year versus last year, and what else are they buying. So that's been really helpful. All right, next one. Issue resolution. So this one, I built into our call logging forms an issue resolution workflow that says, so one, for my part sales team, my call logging form is predominantly drop down, just a couple of drop downs, because I figured the less they have to type and still provide me with useful information, the more likely they'll use it. So one of the options is issue escalation. And so whenever they select that, I've got a workflow in the background that processes just a communication workflow that says, okay, so-and-so has submitted an issue escalation, copy in the regional sales manager, copy in the parts manager, and send those two, plus the sales rep, an email with a copy of all the notes that are in that. And we very quickly saw a benefit of this where, and my objective was that I wanted to allow my sales team to be able to let somebody else whose job is to sit behind a desk help address issues while they continue to go out and talk to the next customer, continue to go out and work on invoicing, and we will work on dealing with issues. Obviously they're copied in and, we work through, make sure everybody's in communication as appropriate, but that has been a really helpful piece of this since we launched our Salesforce with our parts team. So, all right, next one. New hire onboarding. So one, I'd say in terms of training and ongoing training, every new hire outside salesperson that is brought into the team, within the first week to 2 weeks, they get their Salesforce training. So I'm always keeping an eye out for, who's coming in that's new and when can I get them scheduled for training. But the other thing is that, by having yourself set up in Salesforce or whatever, any CRM that you're in, you got easier access to the account and, the territory info, historical activity, sales data, routing tools to be able to build routes, especially for somebody who might be new to an area. And any of those notes that were logged, just for a new person to be able to see what conversations have happened with this account in the past, is also super helpful too. So, all right, next one. And that takes us to Salesforce Maps. All right, so Salesforce Maps was actually the thing that when we decided that we were going to really move forward with Salesforce, The fact that they had this mapping tool was the thing that sold it the most to my executive team. Because they saw that as the thing that was just like, okay, how can that not be helpful for folks? It allows our sales reps to create routes. Again, like I said earlier, less likely to miss customers. They can see on a map, where does everybody plot? And if they're logging their calls frequently or, regularly, then they can also see when was the last time I saw this customer and plot that out on the map too, so that they can spot very easily anybody they've not seen. And then one of the other parts is this whole getting a realistic perspective on how many customers you can actually see in a given area. I had one sales rep who was fairly new. He actually didn't last too long. And the first time I worked with him to build out a route so he was based out in the Boston area, and he had like, I don't know, 50 people in the greater Boston area he thought he was going to see in a single day. I'm like, that's not going to happen. Like, once we looked at it, and it's nice because when you create a route, Salesforce Maps will actually tell you, here's how many miles you're going, here's how many hours it will take to drive that. And then, of course, you got to buffer in how much time do you have to have conversations with folks. Some of your customers are more chatty than others. So there's some good information there that'll just help the salesperson kind of plan their day a little bit better. And then there's other pieces to it, in addition to the routing alone, where you can actually use maps to visualize some of your data. My favorite layer that I add to my map is the no sales in the last 30, 60, or 90 days. So I've created a layer that will basically, color code the customer by their last invoice date was 30 days ago, 60 days ago, 90 days ago, or more. And now when the salesperson logs in, if they add that layer to their map, they're only seeing their accounts, and they can just go straight to what's important to them. Let's say they only want to see customers who have not invoiced in 90 days. Boom, there it is on a map. And if they're planning their day and they know they're going to be in a certain area, they're having a different conversation with the customer who hasn't purchased with them in 90 days than they are maybe with the person who purchased from them, 10 days ago. So there's some really good and interesting ways to use maps, not only for routing, but also for kind of bringing some data to the surface as well. All right, next. Leads management. I talked earlier about the lead assignment for our inbound leads, which has been, for me, a game changer for sure. But also for the sales reps, logging their cold calls. So that's one of the things that I've really been starting to put a heavier focus on in the last, I'd say over the last quarter or so, is telling everybody, okay, we're starting this is what we're doing. We're logging, your cold calls, essentially, anybody that you are trying to bring in as a customer. And, when you log that as a record in Salesforce, now you can also log your conversations. You can keep track of what's happening with that. Because I had some people, I'll go through when I do my one-on-ones and say, okay, let's take a look at your leads. And I remember there was one person in particular where he's like, oh, yeah, I forgot I entered that lead. I don't remember what I talked to him about. And I said to him, like, well, if you logged a call, you could have left a note and then you'd know. And he's like, oh, that's a really good point. I'm like, that's what we're doing here. So, I mean, it sounds simple, but it's just stuff where I think, we get kind of mired in the day-to-day and we just keep doing, what we're doing without thinking about how we can use some of these tools to our greatest advantage. And I'm like, let Salesforce be your memory bank. It's a tool that can definitely help you get leaps and bounds ahead. So, all right, what do I got next? Oh, there we go.
Demo. Yep. So see if I can get out of that and get here. Okay. So thanks, Melinda. I'm going to show some of the stuff that Melinda talked about. We're going to do some Q&A, and maybe she can show some stuff on her system too as we sort of roll through this. But for, most of you on the phone, you know what Salesforce looks like, so we're looking at it here. Now, I think what Melinda did that was real interesting is she didn't start at the account level. So she wasn't going in and kind of having her users find accounts using Search All. Instead, she uses maps as kind of the primary focus point for the reps. And I'm not sure why you thought that was a good, it is a good idea.
No,
but I don't know what brought you there.
It depends. Different folks use it differently. So for the people who are primarily using Salesforce Maps on their mobile app, You gotta remember your salespeople are most likely on the road and they're on their mobile app. So if they're using maps for routing, then they're also doing their account stuff from maps too, because then they're just all in one space.
Okay. So I guess it's kind of a combo of the two. So
Yeah.
so I was going to start here. I always got, so if I, Salesforce search is pretty cool. It's universal. So if I type a couple of letters, it finds everything that matches out there and it kind of lists you for you real quick. You can also use these tabs to figure out. And once you're kind of in an account, excuse me, this page is very customizable, right? So in this demo example, I've got kind of sales by category or by family, is what Salesforce calls it. So it's broken out by parts and repairs and tankers and trailers and vehicles. And you can see that as a rep as you walk into the system. We've also got a whole tab built around analytics here. Now, usually the first thing that people kind of do in a Salesforce journey is build out opportunity management or deal desk. That's completely kind of doable in Salesforce, although base Salesforce opportunities obviously doesn't have the concept of add-ons and doesn't have the concept of trade-ins, but building them with what Salesforce calls custom objects is easy enough to kind of put together. So in the deal itself, you capture basic information about who the customer is and when it's supposed to be, kind of when do you think it's going to close and what do you think is going to line up in terms of the data. And then here in the system, you can go add products. Now, these products can come down from your DMS system. For some clients, we enter what are called quotable products, meaning, you know, we know they want to buy a Kenworth T270, but we don't know the VIN for that yet because it doesn't exist. So we're going to sell them a Kenworth T270, and then we're going to figure out after the fact, you know, as we order the part and get it in, what the VIN is. So there's a couple of different ways to do this, but essentially the idea is you add a product. That price kind of comes in, rolls into the piece. You add any add-ons you've got, and you add trade-ins, and the total of that gets calculated. It gets rolled up eventually to the opportunity level. We can even calculate FET on those deals. So if there's FET related to new products that you've got in the system, you can do that. And what you end up with then is an opportunity that relates to all of the products that you're selling, right? Any of the documents, so you can build documents in Salesforce. There's a couple of add-on tools that allow us to build out really sophisticated, actually, buyer's orders or spec sheets or that kind of stuff inside of the system. And you put that together and build out an opportunity that you then track for the sales guys individually, and then overall for the executive team, so you can see what the overall pipeline looks like, right? That's typically where customers start. It's a small integration, and we bring it down. But once we've got that data there, then we start to get some really interesting kind of information, particularly kind of at the overall sort of, I guess, is that macro? Yeah, micro, small, macro, the macro level, so that you can see that information across the enterprise. And so in Salesforce, they've got a tool called dashboards. It's essentially a way to visually represent all of the data that you're capturing. And in this example, I'm capturing data from both the DMS, right? Sales information from out in the system, either by category or by account or by sales rep, and opportunity, CRM data. What do I have out there in the system that's expected to close? Where is it and what kind of month is it in? And to Melinda's point, activities as well. All of the different calls and emails and stuff that you're doing inside the system gets captured as well. So I can take DMS data, CRM data, pile it together, and give users a really good kind of overview into what the overall data kind of looks like in the system. When Melinda talks about getting to know your customer, once we kind of have this information, we can see, I think I did this at the wrong level. Yeah. So, but you can see at the account level kind of what this information looks like. And then using formula fields in Salesforce, which really isn't a thing in DMS systems, you can then take that information and start to break it out. So in this example, we know AJC, we know their sales, but with a couple of formula fields, I can tell you the difference between this year and last year and even give you a percent increase or decrease on that particular piece and how that sort of works together. So getting the data is, I think Melinda said this, is the beginning, not the end of how we sort of put this together. I don't know if that makes sense, but she also said that, the journey's never really done. That's kind of what, this data is going to basically give us the ability to kind of put together, right? I'm going to show maps real quick and kind of how it works in the system, because I think Melinda's right. I think it takes you to a whole nother level. So in my example that I load in the beginning, it shows me what my opportunities by stage look like. Remember, Melinda was talking about, show me everybody who we've talked to in 30, 60, 90 days. It's kind of a different version of that, where I'm basically saying, show me every opportunity I have out their system. Probably could have colored these pins different because they're all kind of the same color. But tell me where those deals are. Tell me what stage they're in and kind of where I am. The cool thing about maps is that you can start to add layers to that. So I'm going to add, well, the first thing I'm going to add actually is a layer of sales that we've got out there in the system. So for trucks we've sold, but that don't have parts involved in them, I need to find that layer. I'm not having a whole lot of success here. But essentially, I can use information that I've already got in the system, and I can't find it, so I'm going to skip it, and load different information against it. So if I load my accounts against my opportunities, now I can start to see, what accounts I've got in my path. Melinda was talking about that guy that's been there for 10 years. If this is the kind of information that he doesn't see, he could use this to visually sort of represent where his accounts lie. And so I guess from my example, I go from Hartford to out here in the middle of Pennsylvania, but most of my accounts are kind of in Connecticut and in New Jersey and I guess Westchester. The other thing that you can do in Salesforce is build what are called data layers. Now, Salesforce comes with a bunch of different demographic data already loaded as part of, sort of the base application. This is US business data. And so I built a layer and I said, show me all of the data out there where the SIC code is transportation companies and they make more than $3 million a year. Because I don't want to go see somebody who makes $137,000. I don't think they're, buying a truck from us. But if I hover over one of these pins, it'll start to tell me information about records that I have in the system that records that I have out in the world that aren't in my Salesforce system. So I've got all my accounts here, but I've also got this information like M&M Produce out there in the world that, we have never talked to, but, we probably should, right? They're a decent sized business and they're literally on my route as I sort of roll this together.
Hey,
so to
Dan,
Melinda's point, yep, go ahead.
really quick, pull that back up, the pop-up.
Yeah.
On actions,
sorry,
I'm
I have
pretty
my button funny. So sorry, I got to get rid of that. There we go.
On actions, I'm pretty sure you could add an action that says to create a lead.
Yeah, click to create. Yep.
Yep. So if you do, and that's another nice thing. So let's say as a salesperson, you're looking at this and you've got a button in here to create a lead, then that automatically takes that information right into Salesforce as long as you map it right.
Yeah, and turns it into another record that you can kind of follow up with as you roll around. So
yeah, so it's nice the way the two pieces of it, Salesforce Maps and Salesforce Cloud, can work together.
Cool. Okay, so we can take this information and then Melinda was kind of alluding to this, draw basically a boundary around them. So let's grab, I don't know if I got him in the boundary, but let's hope we did. And if I right click in here, I've got a few mass actions I can do. I can update fields. Melinda does this all the time to kind of say, all right, I'm going to go see these people on Monday and these people on Tuesday and these people on Thursday. You can add to a schedule so that you can kind of schedule out who you're going to go see. I'm going to show add to route. And if I add to route, Salesforce is basically going to, remember she was talking about, here's all the accounts that I basically drew into my boundary. Salesforce is going to set them over here for me. And if I and I have a favorite here, I said I'm starting at home. So if I optimize this, it's going to take me from over in here someplace and draw me a route optimized so that I think I have it as my end place too. So it says, all right, I'm starting here and I'm going to drive down through all of this, right? I'm going to drive into here. I'm going to come back down into New Jersey and then I'm going to head home on the highway. And this tells me that I've got basically 5 hours of driving with traffic. So this is probably too big if I'm going to try to fit it into an 8-hour day, if I'm being honest. But this is the kind of information that I can use in the system to start to put this together. And if I save this as a root, what's today? The 19th. If I save this into, if I save this into the, what is it not doing? There we go. Okay. If I save it to the system, now I've got that root available to me. It's on the desktop, which is pretty cool, but it's also available through my mobile. And so this is my telephone kind of logged into the same system. So if I click into maps here, it basically takes me into the system that we were just looking at, right? And I've got the layers that are automatically there. It's calling up my opportunities just like we did a little earlier. But I can also go to that route and basically tell it, here's what I want to go see, and start to grab that information inside of the system. I did this one by opportunities earlier, so that's why you see Kerlick in here 3 times. If I click into any of these records, I then can use this to, give me directions to there. I can look at the record inside of Salesforce, but I think this is what a lot of people use out in the field, is they just log a call. And so Salesforce will let me basically do that on the phone. So like Melinda was saying, if you're basically a road warrior and you're out in the world kind of doing this work, this gives us the ability basically to go into the system, go to visit a customer, Kerluke in this case, and then just log that information as we sort of put together. I just hit speech to text, so it'll do that for me. You'd probably want to, coordinate your thoughts as you sort of put this together, but you certainly don't have to type with your thumbs as you put this together. Sorry, Harris, hold on 1 second. I'm going to hit finish so this stops going. So yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
A quick question. I really like the speech functionality you have here. You had to actually go into an application. Is there any way we can, have maybe a flow action or something like that that will launch that speech functionality instead of going into a text box?
Well, you're going to have to log a call. We could automatically load the log a call button as opposed to having to hit the 3 dots and hit log a call. We could make it that fast. But I think because this isn't Salesforce doing this for us, so I could get you to this screen, not this one you're looking at here. Yeah, I could get you to this screen automatically, but I think a user's still going to have to hit the microphone because it's a phone thing, not a Salesforce thing that's going there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep, 100%.
Okay, cool. All right. Sorry, I'm half driving with my mouse and half driving with my... So anyway, this is going to give us the ability to kind of work through all of those different work through all those different places inside of the system as we roll through. As a user, you've got maps, which is excellent. You've also got all of Salesforce basically out here to chase. So remember when I was looking at Marcus Dairy, I can do the same thing from here and go find those same records inside of the system on my phone. And it's the data, it's the same data, right? It's just a different UI that's showing it to us. I can go see that information while I'm out on the road. To Melinda's point, if you know this information, your sales by category before you end up at Marcus Dairy, that could be pretty useful as you sort of put it together, right? All right, cool. I'm going to pull this off to the side, come back to Salesforce, and kind of wrap up. The last thing that I guess I would talk about is a custom function that we built for a client that I think users could take advantage of. In Arcadium or SalesEye, and there's a bunch of these things that you guys kind of use out there to do this work. The concept of inventory search exists, and it becomes really useful for the reps out in the field as they're sort of looking at either lot inventory or even quotable products to what's available to sell, what's the time frame, what's the mileage, what's the year, and that kind of stuff. So using something like this, we built out 20 fields that you sort of pick. But if I pick a carrier, for example, and I do a search for that, Salesforce, we built some code here that basically goes out and shows me all of the records that match my kind of, I don't have a lot of stuff in here, but all my different data that I've put into these fields and can kind of list them here on the page so that we can get through that. As a user, you're not searching basically one item at a time. And this way you're searching across the system to find, and maybe even across different branches, to find all of the inventory that's out there that either A, matches a customer's requirements, or you think would be useful to have out there to sell to those customers. This is custom code, like I said, but it's pretty useful in the outside world as you sort of roll this together. So yeah, I have no big finish. I just kind of wanted to show those sort of 4 things. If you think about base Salesforce, maps, deal desk, dashboards, and I guess 5 with the inventory search, there's a lot we can do with this tool once we start to roll together, all of that data that you're using in your ERP or your DMS, combined with the stuff that the sales reps should be kind of encouraged or want to tell us naturally. We combine those 2 things together and we get a really sort of a really good view of, kind of overall what's going on in the business. Melinda, anything you want me to show that you think is important that I didn't, or do you want to show something on your screen before we kind of wrap up?
I think you covered it really well. I'd say, just as kind of a final thought, what I said earlier, that your CRM adventure, it is a journey. It's definitely not a one and done. I've got stuff that pops up. I mean, Salesforce, it does releases all the time. And every time there's a new release, there's something that's got to be updated in the system. Sometimes the releases they do will mess up a workflow you've got in place or whatever. That's my favorite. I've had that happen. So whether it's, the management of the system itself, the working with your people, training, process improvement and enhancements, all of those things, it is really an ongoing journey. But, when you approach it as something that, you're putting a lot of love and care into over time, and also some obviously really good thought into, how am I going to use this? For me, it is at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, what am I doing that is going to drive sales and market growth? That's what I ask myself as, we're continuing to grow this thing, and always keeping that in mind too. So
with that, any questions, anything we can help with, any comments, concerns?
Yeah, Dan, this is Quint with Utility Keystone. I have a question for Melinda there. Melinda, you had mentioned something along the lines of using a call center for your parts team.
Mhm.
Do you have your phone system integrated with Salesforce as well then?
Not yet, but that is something I was out there last week because one of the things I started doing is I've got the email to case to create a case, and now I have the text messaging piece built out to create a case. And the next thing I'm going to have to do after that is look at integrating exactly what you said, the phone calls that come in, so that way that will create cases as well. And then at that point, we've got it all really together in one place cohesively.
Awesome. And I'm not familiar with the case or the use of cases in Salesforce, but how does your parts team use that? Can they go from case to quote then at some point, or how do you guys navigate that from an order perspective?
Yeah, the primary user of my case records is my call center team because that's how they're managing their workload. The quoting itself is done in our DMS. So they create the quotes in the DMS, and then when they send it to the parts salesperson, they're sending it via an email inside of Salesforce. So that quote is always tied back to that case that was opened, and the information stays in one place.
Got it. Thank you.
Cool. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Hi. How do you manage all of this with storage? Is it all bought through Salesforce, or do you use like a third-party storage vendor like AWS to link up with Salesforce?
Yeah, no. So Salesforce, you buy a subscription and you get a pretty healthy amount of storage that comes with a subscription. It's stored. I don't know, Hyperforce is probably stored on AWS servers. They also have their own huge data center someplace, a few places in the world that the data is stored. So, but you don't really think about it. You basically buy the subscription and the data kind of comes along for the ride.
All right, I only asked because I was looking at our own Salesforce application, and it says like we only have like 10 gigabytes of storage for our entire tenant. And then to add on to it, we have to purchase like 10 gigs at a time, and it becomes a little pricey after that. So I was wondering if there's a way to just link it to like AWS where storage is a little bit cheaper than buying it directly through Salesforce.
There's not, but Salesforce compresses the data mightily. So by the time it gets to you, 10 gig doesn't sound like an awful lot. That would store tens of millions of rows in Salesforce world, though. So, and if we're getting, I don't know what DMF looks like for you in terms of record counts, but we haven't had, I don't think we've ever had anybody run out of space so it's also assigned by the number of users that you have. So if you have one user, yeah, you might run out of space. But if you've got, 30 users, 40 users, 50 users, you're probably going to be okay.
Okay.
Anybody else? All right, man. Well, I'll get everybody 3 minutes back in their life. I really appreciate you guys coming and hanging around for that. Melinda, thanks so much for kind of talking about your journey. I think if I were going to leave anybody with stuff, I like Salesforce. Obviously, I'm a partner, been a partner for 21 years. But I like Melinda's line that CRM isn't going to solve your problems for you. And that, kind of combining the data with the processes takes some work, but if you're willing to do that and kind of get everybody singing from the same hymnal, it's remarkable what a difference the Salesforce can make for your business. So, and with that, I say thank you very much. I've got calls after this, but late this afternoon, I'll send this out if anybody wants to see it. And I'll probably cut it up into pieces too, so you don't have to listen to the whole hour. You can kind of listen in on the piece you want to do. So thank you very much. Thanks again, Melinda. And we appreciate everybody coming.
All right.
Thanks,
Sure thing.
guys.
You guys have a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.